Welcome back, traveler. Tonight we're doing something reckless the Romans would respect, eating the city with our feet. Forget the marble cliches, no couches, no peacock tongues. We're testing the real Rome. Thermopylae counters, Peppina snacks, and taberna stalls, where appetite outruns etiquette. Here's the paradox. This empire conquered half the world, but most Romans conquered hunger standing up, one sizzling ladle at a time. We'll play street food roulette. If it smells like the sea and sings like pepper, we bite. If it argues like bad vinegar, we pass. Simple rules, zero apologies. We'll chase heat, salt, and acid through barley stews, chickpea pancakes, pickled turnips dyed festival pink, sardines that crunch like thunder, bread planks dripping with history, and a cup of posca that tastes like discipline. We'll learn the quiet cheats. Follow steam, trust the line. Let a single pinch of pepper turn thrift into triumph. By the end, you'll know how to eat like a local in a city that never had time for lunch, and somehow fed millions anyway. If that sounds like your kind of trouble, smash like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's map our own night market across the world. Picture Rome, before the sun decides to clock in. Alleys damp from last night's splash, a mule complaining somewhere off stage, and shutters lifting like eyelids. You're hungry, and the apartment you're renting in that creaky insula has no stove worth arguing with, so you do what half the city does. Follow the steam. At the corner, a U-shaped masonry counter glows with warm dahlia sunk into stone. Welcome to the Thermopylae culture, where breakfast is less a meal and more a handshake with the day. The air is garlic soft, olive shiny, and as persuasive as a grandmother. Hold the thought. Hot bread in a cold hand. Remember it, it's our leitmotif. You slide into the line behind a mason, a midwife, and a boy still dreaming with his eyes open. The keeper lifts a lid the size of a shield. Barley stew blinks back like it's considering citizenship. This is the everyday Roman diet at street speed. Grain forward, flavor loud, price low. The vendor flicks a drizzle of garum as casually as a signature, tosses in chopped greens, and crowns it with yesterday's miracle, a crust that cracks like thunder when it sees your teeth. Next, he barks, but with love. Hot bread in a cold hand, and suddenly the morning has a narrator. If you want to play it lighter, take ancient Roman street food in its pocket edition. Panis scored into wedges, a fig jam the color of gossip, and a clay cup of posca. Vinegar cup of posca. Vinegar cut water that tastes like discipline and keeps you from fainting before noon. Rome doesn't do delicate breakfasts, it does useful ones. You eat standing, because standing says you've got places to be and taxes to ignore. A flute seller trills scales. A money changer counts like a metronome. Someone laughs at a joke Cicero probably told first. Hot bread, cold hand, warm city. Turn left and you'll hit a taberna stall that swears by chickpea pancakes. Panis luteus if the owner is feeling scholarly. Farine faberum if he's flexing. He slaps batter onto an iron, flips with a flourish, and folds in herbs, olives, and with luck, a scrap of salted fish. You get crunch, chew, and the kind of oil that makes your fingers glisten like you're already successful. Street food here isn't cheat day. It's architecture for the stomach. You're not dining. You're equipping yourself. Hot bread in a cold hand, now with a sidekick. Peek inside a Peppina and you'll see Rome's coffee shop without the coffee. It's a bar for Peppina snacks. Olives that remember the sun, cheese with a philosophical rind, walnuts that crack like tiny verdicts. Early drinkers are nursing watered wine and opinions. Keeper knows the regulars by the way their sandals argue with the floor. You don't linger, you graze, you nod. You promise to come back with better stories. The day prefers motion, and so do you. Hot bread in a cold hand, quick salt on the tongue, onward. Follow the road toward the marketplace, and you'll pass a capona, an inn built for distance and decisions. Travelers swallow capona meals that are earnest rather than pretty. Lentils tempered with cumin, barley porridge, maybe a lamb stew if the gods are feeling local. It's heavier than the Thermopylae's speed menu, meant for bodies that will walk until sandals gossip. You steal a spoonful and feel your blood vote. Yes. Somewhere in the background, a cart creaks like an old senator. Hot bread in a cold hand, bowl heat rising like an omen. Now, the myth to kill before it breeds. Patricians lounging all day while the poor nibble sadness. Not quite. Even senators buy a hot bite on the move. Time makes equals of most of us by 10 a.m. The Rome day in the life eating rhythm is democratic. Ientaculum light and fast. Prandium if you remember, Cena if fortune smiles. What changes with class is the seasoning, the plate, and the bandwidth for bragging. The counters, though? The counters feed everyone who admits that hunger negotiates better than pride. Hot bread, cold hand, humble truth. Let your nose steer you for a minute. You'll catch fennel at one doorway, smoke-kissed pork at the next, honey doing its slow-motion magic somewhere nearby. A woman hawks stuffed dates that are illegal in 3 provinces on grounds of being too charming. A kid offers pine nuts like contraband. The city's a playlist of textures. Grit from the paving stones, soft from the bread belly, slick from oil, sting from vinegar. This is ancient Roman street food as choreography. Short bites, short lines, long memories. Hot bread in a cold hand. The city claps on 2 and 4. You ask the keeper how long the stew simmered and he shrugs a proverb. Long enough to forgive mistakes. That's Roman 4. We started yesterday. No. The everyday Roman diet is a masterclass in leftovers, but not the sad kind. Grains and legumes are canvases. The chef is a gossip with herbs. Poor? You get rhythm and heat. Rich? You get garnish and poetry. Either way, lunch will be loyal if you are. Hot bread in a cold hand, patience in a pot. Watch the money flow. A couple of asses for stew, a splash more for a twist of sausage, a handshake price for regulars that would make modern loyalty programs blush. The counters are cash registers for energy. No one's counting calories, everyone's counting steps and cestices. This is why thermopolium culture thrived. Speed plus predictability equals survival in a city that thinks dawn is a suggestion. You pay, you nod, you vanish into the alley like a rumor. Hot bread, cold hand, receipts in your smile. Someone asks about hygiene, and you glance at the boiling pot that could baptize a legion. Rome doesn't sanitize with slogans. It does it with heat and acid. Vinegar in the water, brine in the olives, smoke in the meat, defense by flavor. Would your modern gut win every duel here? Maybe not. But the system keeps the line moving, and the gods entertained. The taberna stalls know. Keep it hot, keep it turning, keep the flies theoretically unemployed. Hot bread in a cold hand. A city learning microbiology by instinct. By mid-morning, the counters swell with a second wave. Scribes, porters, 2 gladiators on their version of a coffee break. You recognize the same human math you used today. I'm busy, I'm broke, feed me fast, make it good. The vendor winks and offers a sampler plate. Barley stew, chickpea wedge, a vinegared cabbage that punches above its weight. You realize Rome day in the life eating isn't about novelty. It's about rehearsal. The city feeds you the way a drum feeds a march. Hot bread in a cold hand. The tempo set. The afternoon already tapping its foot. Before you go, pocket one last secret. The counters are where rumors ripen. Contracts whispered over olives, marriages previewed over figs, politics softened with stew until it sounds reasonable. Food is the city's lubricant and ledger. If you want to know Rome, don't start at the forum. Start at the steam. We'll follow this line through noon into evening. When Peppina snacks get rowdy, Capona meals turn into stories. And the Thermopolium teaches you why simple food becomes sacred after a long day. Hot bread in a cold hand. Now watch what happens when the lamps are lit. By the time the sun clears the rooftops, Rome is fully awake and loudly opinionated. You weave into the forum like a fish joining a current. Scribes, porters, muleteers, and matrons, all shopping with one eye and haggling with the other. Mid-morning isn't a sit-down affair. It's prandium on your feet, an edible intermission in the business of empire. Stalls flash greens and purples, leeks, cabbage, figs, while a brazier hisses like it knows secrets. This is Rome day in the life eating at tempo. You graze, you bargain, you survive the crowd with your dignity mostly intact. Your first stop is a bread seller, whose table looks like a chessboard of crusts. Round loaves for labourers, ring-shaped panis for sling-on-the-finger commuters, and yesterday's discount bread sliced thin to meet today's budget. You ask for a heel, he answers with a wink, and now your hands remember our leitmotif. Hot bread in a cold hand. Okay, warmer now. Bread is the drumbeat under the everyday Roman diet. Everything else is percussion and solo. Across the lane, a cheese and herb stall performs alchemy. The vendor mashes garlic with sheep's milk curd, then folds in mint, celery leaf, and a whisper of olive oil. Moritum, the spread that could make even a senator's speech palatable. Scoop it onto bread, and you're suddenly fluent in ancient Roman street food. The flavor is bright, grassy, unapologetic. It tells you Rome prefers honesty you can taste. You nod to the vendor, like you've shared a proverb. A little further on, smoke curls from a pan where lucanique sausage pops like punctuation. The butcher slashes coins of meat into a shallow bowl, splashes vinegar and blizzards pepper until your eyes negotiate a treaty. If you want papina snacks without the wine, this is your loophole. Quick protein, quick gossip, quick exit. Rome rewards momentum. Chew and move, or get adopted by a lecture on municipal drains. Now, dive into liquids. A water seller lifts a glazed amphora and pours Posca into a travel cup. Vinegar water that tastes like common sense and keeps the crowd from melting. Beside him, another hawker swirls mulsum, honeyed wine for those not needed at a chisel or an abacus this afternoon. The line at the Posca man is longer. Empire runs on diluted stubbornness. Thermopolia keep the warm things warm. Vendors like these keep the warm people standing. Thermopolium culture scaled down to a gulp. You hear the clack of shells and find a stall selling salted mussels and tiny river fish, each fried to a crisp philosophy. A squeeze of citron, a pinch of cumin, and the Tiber suddenly forgives you for everything you said about its smell. Street fried fish isn't fancy, but it is fearless. If you're keeping a keyword tally, yes, this counts as ancient Roman street food and as an experiment in how loudly a snack can crunch. Look for the vegetable grills. Thin ribbons of leeks, cabbage wedges lacquered with oil, onions bullied into sweetness. Cook with forearms like amphora handles. Sets a plank of bread under the grate, so it soaks up every drip, then hands it over like a signed painting. This is the stealth luxury of the everyday Roman diet. Humble ingredients rehearsed until they sing. No marble, no slaves, just timing and heat, and a line of regulars who know good music when they smell it. Slip into a shady corridor of tabernar stalls and watch trade masquerade as lunch. Cobblers sew between bites, scribes sand wax tablets with one hand and pop olives with the other, and a spice dealer proposes marriage to anyone who buys his best pepper. In a corner, a girl sells stuffed dates rolled in sesame and honey, the kind of sweetness that makes you believe treaties are possible. Rome's genius isn't only conquest. It's multitasking with a full mouth. At the edge of the market, a tiny peppina hums like a beehive. The counter offers marinated olives, pickled turnips dyed festive with beetroot, and a bowl of pulse, barley porridge, stiffened with cheese so it eats like a plan. A carpenter orders a cup of wine cut 3 parts water because afternoons require judgment. You grab a skewer of grilled liver dusted with lovage and pepper and understand the city's thesis. Fuel first, finesse later. Pina snacks are how dignity and hunger sign a truce. Travelers angle toward a doorway draped in a weary curtain. A kalpana, equal parts inn and rumour mill. Inside, lentils simmer with cumin and coriander. A pot of beef stretches itself with barley and hope. Kapona meals don't try to seduce your tongue. They persuade your legs. You sit on a bench that has held 1,000 decisions and watch men count distances in bites. If dinner earns stories, prandium earns miles. Somewhere, an old soldier hawks botellus, blood sausage, while telling a joke about Gauls that refuses to die. You try it because curiosity is braver than advice. Iron rich, garlicky, steadies the wrist. Rome doesn't have time to be squeamish. It has time to be efficient. And efficient tastes better than expected, especially when the pepper hits the back of your throat like a trumpet. Rome day in the life eating keeps surprising you with honesty. Pocket a handful of nuts for the road, pine nuts if you're feeling imperial, walnuts if you're practical, and notice how your mid-morning looked like a feast without ever sitting down. That's the Roman trick. Knit small bites into a working rhythm so the city can keep its promises. Hot bread in a not-so-cold hand now. Herbs on your breath. Vinegar keeping your step sharp. We'll let the sun swing a little lower, then meet the afternoon rush. When ovens wake up again, sauces get bolder, and the counters turn from fuel stations into neighborhoods, ready to chase the shadows toward the bakeries that hypnotize entire streets. By early afternoon, the air changes keys. The sun leans heavier on the tiles, doves have opinions, and an aroma rolls down the alley with the confidence of a victorious general. Fresh bread. Rome's pistrina, bakeries, come alive like volcanoes with schedules. Millstones groan, boys shout, and a flower haze turns the doorway into a gentle storm. You drift closer because you're human. This is Rome day in the life eating at its most hypnotic, a city conducting your feet with scent alone. Inside, a donkey circles the mill, hooves tracing patience, while stones chew grain into promise. A baker scores dough, with a fast practiced wrist, branding each round like a tiny moon. Wedges faintly marked so households can split them like treaties later. The crusts crackle as if gossiping about your self-control. This is the backbone of the everyday Roman diet. Grain transformed into fuel, rhythm turned edible. Our leitmotif returns. Hot bread in a cold hand, though at this hour your hand is warm and the bread still wins. A helper slides flatbreads across heated stones, baptizing them with oil, rosemary, and a reckless sprinkle of salt. Somewhere, a pan hosts a primitive ancestor of focaccia. Elsewhere, little rounds get topped with olives or cheese that melts into a grin. Call it ancient Roman street food or call it therapy. The effect is the same. People come in harried and leave carrying edible calm, steam curling like punctuation from their bundles. Just outside, a woman runs a tiny sauce store. Mortar, pestle, and a tray of herbs that look like gossip in green. She grinds garlic with sheep's cheese, folds in celery leaf and mint, and, for paying customers with brave tongues, a sliver of fermented fish magic. Garum's humbler cousin. A swipe of this onto a heel of bread, and you've engineered a meal that doesn't apologize. This is thermopolium culture in miniature. Hot counter meets cold condiment, speed married to satisfaction. Bakers know the afternoon crowd. Apprentices with dust in their eyebrows. Matrons negotiating dinner. Porters timing purchases between loads. The counter becomes theater. Try the sesame twist. And you, soft touch that you are, try it. Seeds pop, honey smirks, and you promise a god you'll walk the long way home. Taberna stalls nearby capitalize, selling nuts and dried figs to befriend all those new loaves before you reach your door. Watch how the street manages temperature like a philosophy. Bread leaves ovens on wooden paddles, meets cool air, then meets warm palms. Vendors keep dolia, stone-set jars, of barley stew still mumbling from lunch, ready to ladle into bowls for anyone who wants ballast with their loaf. It's a duet, crisp and soft, hot and cooler, the city and the citizen keeping each other in tune. Ancient Roman street food wasn't a novelty cart, it was urban climate control. If you've earned a little flourish, look for sweet things that don't shout. Cheese fritters, globy, kissed by honey. Tiny curd cakes, libum, offered first to household gods, and then to your patients. date-stuffed pastries rolled in sesame. So your fingertips smell like a festival. None of it is overloaded. It's restrained joy, the kind you can eat and still go back to work. Peppina snacks will get louder at dusk. For now, the afternoon prefers charm over bravado. In the shadow of the bakery arch, a grizzled man sells pickled vegetables from glazed pots. Cabbage with attitude, leeks with an education, turnips dyed riotous by beetroot. He forks a tangle onto your bread, and the whole thing becomes a sandwich that Rome might not have named yet, but clearly understands. Acid wakes up the crumb. Oil smooths the edges. Cumin winks like a bad idea you're glad you had. The everyday Roman diet thrives on this balance. Heat, tang, fat, repeat. Not all ovens face the street. Some Capona meals start now in back rooms. Lamb stews thickening, lentils settling into wisdom, barley softening until it forgives life. Travelers drift in, trade road dust for spoon warmth, and write new plans between bites. You notice the difference. Thermopolia sprint. Capone pace themselves. One feeds errands, the other feeds mileage. Either way, afternoon is the hinge on which appetite turns toward evening. A boy with arms like bread paddles hustles loaves marked with a family stamp. Yes, bakeries track clients with little terracotta seals. He'll deliver them up narrow stairs where kitchens are dreams, and braziers do the heavy lifting. That's why thermopolium culture dominates the ground floor. Rome outsourced heat for safety and sanity. The street is the stove. Your coins are the pilot light. You fund flame by the ladle. Between bites, listen to the soft economy of favors. The baker saves the first crust for an old soldier who once saved his son from a drunken mule. A midwife cuts the line because she simply earned it. A vendor slides you an extra twist because you returned his dropped coin this morning. Food is currency, yes, but it's also grammar. Please, thank you. I remember. Rome Day in the Life eating teaches citizenship, one crust at a time. Pocket your last loaf and feel the city rotate toward gold. Afternoon shadows stretch like cats, conversations lengthen. Someone tunes a double pipe in an alley that pretends not to be a stage. In an hour, Peppina snacks will trade restraint for laughter, and wine will start arguing philosophy it can't spell. For now, you're armed with bread, a smear of sauce, and that refrain we keep swearing by. Hot bread in a warm hand this time, and the promise that evening will taste even better. Shall we follow the scent toward the counters where day workers clock out and the city loosens its sandals? Evening slides down Rome like a curtain, and the streets switch instruments. Carts hush, sandals gossip, and the first lamps streak the air with beeswax and smoke. That's your cue to follow the laughter toward a low doorway painted with grapes and a rooster. Inside the Peppina, counters glow with terracotta warmth, cups clack like polite arguments, and a brazier roars as if auditioning for tragedy. You're not here for ceremony. You're here for Peppina snacks that punch the day in the shoulder and pour it a drink. Our leitmotif adjusts for night. Hot bread in a warm hand, salt on the lip, and a story unrolling at the speed of a ladle. Start with a house bowl. Olives bruised with herbs, glossy as secrets. Peeper lifts the lid and you get steam carrying garlic, pepper, and the bass note of garum. It's not subtle, it's Roman. He spears you bites from skewers, liver sprinkled with lavish, little sausages snapping like punctuation, and drops them on a plate already smiling with mustard. This is ancient Roman street food under a roof. Fast, loud, and calibrated for conversation. You eat, nod, and allow the day to unclench. Wine is a workshop, not a dare. Helped with water to keep the stories upright, sometimes sweetened with honey, mulsum if the crowd's been heroic. Cups pass clockwise like a civic oath. The tavern boy watches levels the way priests watch incense. The goal at a Peppina isn't oblivion. It's permission. To repeat a joke. To forgive a foreman. To promise you'll actually fix the hinge tomorrow. You're practicing citizenship with a refill. On the hot counter, chickpea batter hisses into thin pancakes that fold around herbs, and the last lucky scraps of salted fish. A clay dish of pulse, barley porridge, gets stiffened with cheese, so it eats like determination. Pickled turnips, dyed theatrical pink with beet, stand guard like stage props. This is the everyday Roman diet in nightlife mode. Humble ingredients, upgraded by timing, heat, and the chemistry between strangers who've decided to be a temporary family. Listen for the dice. Someone shakes a cup. Ivory bones clatter. A groan rises like a small storm. Gambling isn't strictly legal, which is adorable. Nothing is more Roman than a rule that survives by being ignored with flourish. Wages are tiny. Nuts, dates, a round of wine. The bragging rights are the real currency. At the next table, a poet recites 2 good lines and 2 generous lies. Both land with applause. Rome, day in the life eating, transforms into listening. Don't sleep on the vegetables. Rome doesn't. Grilled leeks lacquered in oil, cabbage with pepper and vinegar, onions cooked to velvet, each ladled over bread until the crumb drinks like a philosopher. A bowl of lentils whispers cumin and common sense. A saucy stew of chickpeas asks for one more heel of bread, and you comply. You feel how thermopolium culture and taberna stalls trained the city for this moment. Quick hands, fast swaps, flavor as choreography. In the back room, a traveller's Capona meal is finding its stride. Mutton braised low, barley thick enough to anchor a story, a clay pot of beans that taste like patience. The innkeeper's wife moves like a general. Her spoon enforces discipline. Roads are negotiated here. Who leaves at dawn, who waits for a safer escort, who trades a spare cloak for a seat by the brazier. Food isn't just fuel, it's a map that draws itself while you chew. Etiquette is elastic, but not absent. You don't brag about second helpings. You do offer your bench space when a midwife arrives mid-shift. Dice are fine if the keeper likes you. Singing is fine until it's not. Watch how regulars police the room without words. An eyebrow here, a shifted cup there. This is the Roman genius for self-governance in miniature. The Republic, rehearsed nightly over olives. Your nose keeps filing reports. You get citrus peel flashing through honeyed wine. Fennel seeds crushed under a mortar, rosemary oil tapping your pulse, and that familiar tang of vinegar that makes cabbage a conversation. The soundtrack is wooden spoons drumming dolia lids, cups kissing counters, and the occasional bark of a laugh that knocks dust from the beams. You're conducting an orchestra with a skewer. If the budget allows, let sweet things close the fingers in the day. Globy, cheese fritters glossed with honey, or dates stuffed with nuts and pepper. A Roman party trick that shouldn't work and always does. The sweetness isn't childish, it's tactical, enough to convince the body to send up a white flag. You register that ancient Roman street food rarely overdosed sugar. It's too busy balancing salt, fat, and acid like a juggler who never drops anything but names. Notice the social chemistry. A bricklayer and a bookkeeper arguing the price of pepper as if either controls Arabia. A retired legionary teaching a boy to keep score. 2 laundry women laughing in a way that redeems the day. The papina is where class temporarily edits itself for usefulness. Bread is cheap, opinions are free. The rules are written in appetite and amended in laughter. If the Senate is a theatre of power, this is a workshop of peace. When the keeper douses embers with a sigh that sounds like a blessing, you realize night has divided itself neatly. Noise, warmth, a full mouth, then a gentler street. You step out, carrying the last echo of pepper and beeswax. Tomorrow will want the same, fuel, friction, and forgiveness, and Rome will have it ready. But first, walk with me through the lamplit alleys where shuttered taberna stalls whisper secrets, and a few brave counters keep simmering for night workers. Midnight doesn't hush Rome. It merely changes the color of its hunger. The Tiber murmurs like a tired baritone. The paving stones sweat a little, and somewhere a shuttered counter breathes through a crack of light. Follow the flower on the wind, and you'll find the bakers, faces ghosted white, arms glossy with heat, turning dough into sunrise. Law or custom, it doesn't matter. Bread is tomorrow's promise drafted at night. You stand in the alley like a conspirator and feel our leitmotif flip for the graveyard shift. Hot bread in a cold hand, steam rising into the cool like a vow. A boy slips a peel under round loaves branded with client's stamps, char blush kissing the edges. He trades you a heel for news. A small coin, a smaller rumor, both accepted. This is Rome day in the life, eating with the volume turned down. Same rhythm, softer drums. You tear salt with your pocket, and the night forgives you for being awake. Bakers talk in short verbs. Knead, score, feed, turn, because conversation loses to the hiss of heat and the arithmetic of rise. Around the corner, a tiny brazier keeps vigil beside shuttered tabernacle stalls. A widow stirs barley into a sleepy stew, the kind that remembers cumin even at 2 a.m. She sells to muleteers, to scribes with deadlines, to anyone who knows that a bowl can carry you farther than bravado. This is thermopolium culture. After hours, one pot, one ladle, one kind of mercy. The spoon knocks the rim like a knock at a friend's door. The vigils drift through like constellations. Bucket, hook, cloak, firefighters, and watchmen on patrol. They buy olives bruised with garlic, a curl of sausage, bread still humming from the oven, and a skin of Posca that tastes like discipline. No speeches here, just peppina snacks, repurposed for work. Protein you can walk with, salt that keeps you honest, vinegar that reminds the throat to drink. You nod to them, and they nod back as if you're both employees of the same night. Down by a warehouse, a porter's lantern paints the air with smoke ring halos. A woman grills leeks until they confess their sweetness, lays them across bread, then baptizes the whole thing with oil and pepper. You bite and feel the city reassemble in your mouth. Heat, fat, acid, patience. Ancient Roman street food isn't a festival, it's maintenance. Tonight, it preserves the idea of mourning for those who are paying it in advance. At a crossroads shrine, a cramped topina keeps a single dolium of chickpea batter alive. The owner flips thin pancakes that fold around herbs and the last scraps of salted fish, then presses them in warm hands like receipts. Wine is cut with water and trust. Jokes are cut with yawns and the creak of door hinges. When laughter tips too high, the keeper taps the counter, a temple's tiny bell. Even in darkness, the everyday Roman diet prefers order to accident. Travelers who hit the gates late slide into a smoky capona and surrender to a pot of lentils that tastes like wisdom reheated. The innkeeper's wife doles out capona meals that don't flatter the tongue so much as steady the knees. Barley thickened, mutton patient, cabbage that met vinegar and came back a better person. Road maps come out, distances calculated in bowls. If you want to understand logistics, watch who orders seconds and who decides to sleep. Rivermen take their break on steps that remember 1,000 sandals. Someone opens a jar of pickled turnips that wear beetroot like festival paint. Someone else cracks walnuts in a corner of a cloak. A third lays out dried figs like coin. This is Rome day in the life, eating in ledger form. Small, countable, portable. And it turns strangers into a shift. You share because the river taught everyone to move in bundles. Listen to the night's pantry. Rosemary bruised under thumb, pepper sneezing stars into the air, vinegar flashing moods through steam. The thermopolium culture of day has learned a whisper register, and the pots talk in low vowels. Even the cats negotiate politely. When the brazier flares, faces bloom out of shadow and retreat again, like secrets practicing their entrances. There's a moral here that never climbs onto a podium. People who keep your mornings possible deserve first claim on flavor. So the fresh crust goes to the messenger, the olive's best oil to the midwife, the prime ladle stew to the man who will hoist sacks until a purple seam opens across the sky. Taberna stalls may be shuttered, but the city's covenant is open for business. You feed those who carry the hours for everyone else. If you're brave, try the night syrup. honey loosened with warm water and a strip of citrus peel that brightens the tongue without waking it fully. It's the opposite of triumph. It's consent to sleep later. Night cuisine has its own etiquette. Less sugar, more kindness, portions that won't pick a fight with the pillow. Ancient Roman street food knows when to lead, and when to let the sheets win. Somewhere a cock rehearses dawn. Somewhere a baker laughs like someone who already knows the punchline. You tuck a spare loaf under your arm, steam slipping into the chill, and promise to remember how the dark fed you. In an hour the baths will wake, and with them an entire ecosystem of towel boys, oil sellers, and snack counters, built to refuel bodies scrubbed into hope. Step through the bronze doors of the baths, and the day sheds its armor. Cloaks vanish into cubbies, sandals kiss the mosaic, and the air changes temperature. Inlayers cool marble in the apoditarium, then the tepid kiss of the warm room, then the caldarium's hot breath that fogs your intentions. You scrape skin with oil and striggle like a civilized lizard. Let a slave knead your shoulders into humility, then shock yourself awake in the frigidarium until all your regrets take a number. And just as your blood decides to be Roman again, you catch it. The corridor's edible perfume. Bread crust, sesame, pepper, fennel, and the faint resin of wine that slept in pitch-sealed amphorae. Recovery begins where steam ends. Outside the main gate, a crescent of counters has learned the schedule of clean citizens. A baker sets out rings of bread, braided with sesame and anise. The kind that crack just enough to remind your jaw it exists. Beside him, a vendor spoons moretum, garlic and sheep's cheese mashed with herbs, into clay saucers, and pretends it's medicine, which it is for people who just sprinted through 3 rooms of Roman weather. This is thermopolium culture with towel marks, fast, salty, lively, calibrated for the body you've just rinsed back into usefulness. Hydration is a Roman debate with snacks attached. A boy pours posca, vinegar water that tastes like discipline, into travel cups, while an older man uncorks honeyed mulsum and a resin-tinged table wine that smells faintly of pine forest and amphora glue. You think sports drink, they think civilization, and both are right. The crowd votes with lines. Laborers take the posca, philosophers pretend not to enjoy the sweetness, and everyone agrees the resin pairs too well with olives to be an accident. Rome day in the life eating runs on liquids that bargain with thirst, not bully it. Salt returns like a legion. Bowls of lupini beans glisten, popping their skins between thumb and forefinger in a tiny ritual that could qualify as religion. Olives bruise under garlic and rosemary. Pickled turnips flash festival pink. Celery stalks soak in brine until even virtue tastes good. The everyday Roman diet knew long before trainers did that sweat, asks for minerals in a language called snack. You're not indulging. You're negotiating with your own blood. For the protein faithful, a brazier whispers arguments in smoke. Little skewers of liver, dusted with lovage, slashes of lucanique sausage that snap like witty comebacks, and thin slivers of grilled fish brightened by citron and black pepper. The cook lays a plank of bread under the rack so it drinks the drippings, then sells the plank like a signed painting. Call them papina snacks if you like. They've simply moved outdoors to catch the steam room traffic. You eat standing. Dignity is a portable technology. Sweet things, edited for post-bath clarity, make their case without shouting. Cheese fritters, globy, glossed with honey. Tiny curd cakes, libum offered first to household gods, and then bashfully. Sugar isn't the point, balance is. A smear of honey convinces the body that the afternoon deserves you. That's ancient Roman street food at graduate level. Charm as dosage at oil. The social atlas around the Thermae is its own civics class. Senators pretend to notice architecture while negotiating favors. Merchants price pepper with their eyes. A poet trades 2 lines for a sesame ring. Athletes inhale without counting. Around the snack line, class blurs into appetite, and a towel is the most democratic garment in the city. No one asks if you dined reclining last night. They ask if you want extra mustard. This is Rome day in the life, eating as temporary republic. Listen for the merchants who orbit these stones. A spice man lets you crush a fennel seed between teeth to clear the head. A green seller fans you with romaine like an affectionate matron. A nut hawker rattles walnuts in a woven tray as if auditioning for percussion. Taberna stalls migrate toward hot crowds like starlings to breadcrumbs, and the baths are the city's warmest thermals. You learn the economy by ear, you learn lunch by smell. On quieter steps, the practical counters stage copona meals for travelers who washed off a road and found an appetite. Lentils with cumin and coriander, barley stewed until it forgives life, mutton that remembers patience, bowls that steady hands better than oaths. An innkeeper's wife keeps attendance with a ladle, second helpings for the man who limps, extra broth for the girl whose fingers still shiver. Hospitality here is logistics with empathy. Etiquette outside the baths is elastic but legible. Pet hair earns the front of the line. Loud voices earn a stare. Dice wait until sandals are dry. Regulars police the curb through a choreography of eyebrows, and the keeper keeps order with the soft tyranny of a wooden spoon tapped twice on terracotta. This is why thermopolium culture thrives. Speed without chaos, warmth without sermon. The Republic has many little capitals. A good counter is one. A final flourish for the clean and hungry. The sauceman with a marble mortar, grinding garlic and mint into cheese, then folding in celery leaf, oil, and a quiet smear of alec so the ocean hums under everything. Swipe onto a still warm ring, and the world makes sense in 6 bites. Heat, salt, acid, fat, crunch, bragging rights. The everyday Roman diet isn't simple, because Rome lacked imagination. It's simple because simplicity wins on crowded streets. Pocket a sesame ring for the walk home, and feel the city cool 2 shades. Steam thins over the roofs, the gymnasium empties of grunts and good intentions, and the food stalls start rehearsing for the evening rush near the forums and theatres. We'll drift there next, where vendors chase shadows along colonnades, actors snack between acts, and supper plans get rewritten by smells that refuse to take no for an answer. The sun slips sideways along the colonnades, and suddenly Rome looks dressed for company. Marble columns trade shadows like fans. Vendors set shallow braziers at respectful intervals so smoke rises in well-behaved ribbons. Actors in half-costume pace, muttering lines to figs and pigeons. You join the promenade because that's what a clever stomach does, drifting from arch to arch, until a tray of olives finds your hand as easily as a doorknob. This is Rome day in the life, eating done in silk slippers. Still practical, just better lit. Under one arch, a woman with a coppersmith's forearms turns out chickpea, fritters crisp as a fresh decree. She stacks them on bread warmed against the brazier, then flicks vinegar that makes the evening blink awake. The trick is contrast, hot and cool, crunch and plush, salt and sour shaking hands like old friends. Call it ancient Roman street food, or call it rehearsal dinner for the night. Either way, your pulse remembers the choreography. The first bite quiets all the noisy decisions you didn't make today. A few steps on, a mortar sings under a pestle. Moritum again, garlic, herbs, sheep's cheese. Only tonight the vendor adds celery leaf and a shy smear of alec, so the sea hums at baritone. Spread on a coin of bread, and it feels like a speech that chose the right length. This is the everyday Roman diet showing off its thesis. Take grain, add nerve, finish with brightness. You nod to the vendor like you've just been promoted. Near the theatre doors, a tray glitters with stuffed dates, rolled in sesame, a trick Romans refuse to apologize for. Inside each, a nut hides, pepper pricks the aftertaste, and honey smooths everyone's feelings about it. It's not dessert. It's diplomacy with an edible seal. Play goes by 2 for luck, and 1 for the actor they're pretending not to watch. Sweet sweets here know their lines and hit their marks. Along portico's edge, a brazier breathes over skewers, liver dusted with lavish, lucanicae snapping like confident opinions, thin fish kissed by citron. The cook slides a plank of bread under the rack to capture drippings, then sells the plank like a ticket to a better mood. Think of it as papina snacks in their formal wear, relocated outdoors where the air can admire them. You balance your skewer and realize dignity can absolutely be eaten standing. Not all counters push heat, some pour intelligence. A boy ladles posca for the plain-spoken Molsum, for the honey-inclined, and resin-scented table wine for those who like their evenings to taste like pine and amphora. Lines tell the truth faster than manifestos. After baths, and before theatre, first negotiates, never begs. That's thermopolium culture at its cleverest. Liquids calibrated to make conversation land on its feet. A trio of taberna stalls has migrated to the shade like birds to a fountain. One rattles walnuts in a basket with the rhythm of applause, one fans romaine with showy tenderness, one opens little jars of pickled turnips, flashing festival pink. You learn the vendor's banter without trying. Prices are compliments with arithmetic, samples are rumors with salt. Rome sells you appetite and gives you gossip free with purchase. Behind a curtain painted with grapes, the innkeeper of a nearby Capona sets out travel bowls for late arrivals. The sort of Capona meals that steady a stranger before the first act. Lentils with cumin, barley that forgives long roads, a mutton stew practiced in patience. You lean on the doorpost and watch the choreography. Coins, ladle, thanks, bench, breathe. Roads enter the city here, not as triumphs, but as suppers. The air itself edits your cravings. Pepper writes punctuation in the nose. Fennel clears the head. Rosemary teaches bread to remember its crust. Beeswax from fresh-lit lamps warms the edges of everything, and the marble underfoot holds the day's heat like an afterthought. When a breeze slides through the portico, sesame rings crackle like they approve of your life choices. Street eating becomes a perfume you can answer. Etiquette lives in small gestures. You step aside for damp hair from the baths. Lift your cup when an old soldier's cane taps. Lean an elbow off the counter when a midwife appears, with that look that says she's earned the front of the line. The keeper's wooden spoon is law enough. Tap twice on terracotta when dice grow ambitious or voices forget their sharing. Governance here is polite choreography, amended nightly and ratified in olives. If you're counting coins, a sample plate buys time. 2 fritters, a semicircle of bread under drippings, pickled cabbage with a temper, 3 olives that remember the coast. It's an edible hourglass. You eat as the light tilts and the crowd warms toward spectacle. The everyday Roman diet proves again that simplicity isn't poverty. It's strategy. The city feeds you like a drumline feeds a march. Steady, persuasive, impossible to ignore. Somewhere, a flute tests a scale, and the crowd answers by loosening its shoulders. Actors roll their airs into the air. Someone laughs before the punchline lands. You tuck a still warm ring into your cloak, hot bread in a warm hand tonight, and let the current carry you toward the steps where torches glow and stories get their cue. Supper will have its say later. For now, it's enough to taste the city, agreeing to be a theatre and a kitchen in the same breath. The theatre empties like a tide, and the colonnades breathe again. You drift with the crowd past torchlight and laughter toward doors, painted with grapes and roosters, toward braziers that say, "The night isn't finished with you yet." Actors still in half-masks nibble olives. A flute tries out a farewell. Supper starts right there, standing, with a heel of bread warming your palm. Hot bread in a warm hand, and a quick smear of garlic cheese to remind you that stories feed best when your mouth is busy. This is Rome day in the life eating, doing its graceful bow. If you've got coins, a counter offers a plate that understands fatigue. Chickpea fritters stacked on bread, grilled leeks glossed in oil, pickled turnips flashing festival pink. A drizzle of vinegar wakes the tongue like a backstage cue. These are papina snacks tuned for recovery. Salt forward, heat polite, acid clever. Someone passes watered wine. Someone else swears their cousin saw a senator laugh. Supper isn't a destination. It's a slow landing. The street becomes a pantry on legs. Taberna stalls swing out their last call trays. Walnuts, pine nuts, jars of moratum sealed under a sheen of oil, little packets of dried figs tied with twine. You shop like a tactician. Bread for ballast, greens for crunch, sauces for gossip, and build a walking supper that fits in one hand and a cheek. The everyday Roman diet is a mosaic of small tiles. You're just choosing which ones catch the lamplight. Past the theatre, an inn's doorway sighs warm air, and travellers fold into benches like ships into harbour. Inside, Capona meals get earnest. Lentils thick with cumin, barley that finally forgives the road, mutton stewed until even pride softens. You inhale, and the whole day unclenches at the hinge. No spectacle, no bravado, just bowls that make feet trust stairs again. Relief tastes like patience and pepper. Take the long way home, and you'll find the thermopolium culture still humming in pocket form. A widow ladles out barley stew from a dolium that has been quietly negotiating with time since noon. She crowns it with chopped greens and a respectful rumour of garum. A boy flips thin chickpea pancakes, folds in herbs and leftover fish, and hands you one like a receipt for having shown up to your own evening. Street steam curls into night like handwriting finishing a sentence. Now split the city along its sleepy seam. In ground floor rooms where braziers glow, families in insulae turn ancient Roman street food into home. Bread spread with garlic and cheese, cabbage sautéed small, a handful of olives bullied into generosity with rosemary. Overhead in gracious domus, a steward arranges cena more formally. Gustaccio of olives, eggs, and salad, with honeyed vinegar. Prima mensa, maybe fish or pork with leeks. Secunda mensa, fruit, cheese, sweet curd cakes. Different plates, same human thesis. Grain, greens, salt, and a story about the day. Listen for the domestic percussion. Knife on board, amphora seal popping, a clay lid wrapping a pot like a polite door. Your host mashes myrtum in a mortar that knows everyone's grip, folds in celery leaf and mint, and spoons it over last hour's bread. A daughter fans the brazier, while a son raids the nut bowl as if theft were a culinary technique. The everyday Roman diet thrives in this choreography. The street speed, the home's patience, and a sauce that forgives the timing of both. Etiquette, even at home, has a laugh line. Bread breaks to the right. The best olives travel clockwise. The person who fetched the water gets first claim on the warm plank that sat under the grill and drank the drippings. Wine is cut with water because the morning exists. Talk is cut with grace because tomorrow needs allies. If dessert appears, it's modest and persuasive. Libum with honey, dates hiding nuts and a pinch of pepper. You learn restraint without ever feeling deprived. You'll notice how leftovers are not an apology. They're architecture. Yesterday's barley becomes tonight's crisp cake in the pan. Cabbage returns with vinegar and a better attitude. The last slice of sausage, shy, heroic, dices itself into a chickpea skillet. Streets and kitchens share a single brain. Don't waste momentum, don't waste flavor, don't waste coin. That's ancient Roman street food whispering from your shelf. Method first, then bragging. Somewhere a neighbor knocks with a bowl to swap. Lentils for leeks, figs for bread. Because supper is a small republic that ratifies itself nightly. News thickens over sauce. A tax delayed, a birth eased, a roof that finally agreed to stop raining indoors. You will realize why counters double as bulletin boards and why taberna stalls remember your name. Food is the city's filing system for favors. When the house yawns, the last rituals tidy the day. Crust for the lares, a splash of wine to the hearth, lids set askew so pots don't sulk overnight. You save a sesame ring for tomorrow's first hunger, and a smear of sauce in a covered dish because breakfast prefers a head start. The room dims, the bread sleeps, the mortar dreams in garlic. No one announces it, but you can feel the handoff to the bakers already at their mills. Step into the courtyard and breathe beeswax, rosemary, and the coin metal cool of night. Somewhere a donkey circles a stone, somewhere a watchman taps his staff, and somewhere a brazier decides it has one more song. The city has fed you without ceremony and promised to do it again at dawn. All you owe it is a good appetite, a better memory, and the common sense to follow steam when you smell it. Start at the river before dawn, where the air tastes a little of iron and salt, and the ropes creak like old knees. Grain barges ease in from Ostia, bellies full of Egypt and Africa, and you can feel the city relax just watching them kiss the pilings. Porters sing work songs that keep shoulders in rhythm. Scales clack. Wax tablets get new scars. You don't eat grain. You eat what grain lets everything else become. Batter, fritters, thickened stews. Without these boatloads, Rome day in the life eating is just appetite with good intentions. Follow the Sax inland to the Horia, the great brick warehouses that breathe like animals. The air is chaff and mousetrap tang, cool even when the street burns. Clerks measure by modius, stamping numbers that will turn into crusts next week. You learn a civic truth the hard way. Order is flavor. The everyday Roman diet depends on 1,000 tiny obediences. Ropes coiled right, scales honest, doors barred against damp. One leak is hunger with a long memory. On dole days, the Annona line braids through streets like a living rope. Men and widows clutch tokens, children invent games between knees, and someone sells walnuts because commerce hates a captive audience. When the counterman tips a measure into your sack, you feel a small thunder of citizenship, the state saying, E8, then argue with us. The thermopolium culture you love, the hot dolia, the quick ladle, quietly rides this tide. No grain, no counters, no chorus of next, and a smile. Turn left into a pistrinum, a bakery that's also a machine. Donkeys circle treadmills, hooves writing circles into dust, while millstones chew wheat into daylight. Bakers feed ovens with bundled sticks that snap like applause. Dough is scored, stamped, and branded with terracotta seals so bread finds its way home to the right stairwell. You hold a warm round and feel our old leitmotif return, not as poetry, but as logistics. Hot bread in your hand, because an empire kept its appointments. The Guild of Bakers behaves like a quiet senate. Prices are watched, weight is posted, and the penalty for cheating is public and persuasive. A good baker stretches grain with brains, spelt when wheat sulks, barley when storms sulk harder. Nothing is wasted. Yesterday's loaves become today's soups, tomorrow's batters or crumbs that give fried fish a spine. This is the everyday Roman diet as engineering, small corrections that keep hunger from getting ideas. Walk the alley behind the ovens and count the satellites that depend on that heat. A sauce seller with garlic hands waits for crusts to split. A pickle man cools jars on a windowsill. A sausage maker times his smoke to borrow the bakery's draft. Tabernar stalls, orbit predictable fire, the way sailors follow stars. You realize ancient Roman street food isn't straight because it's messy. It's street because the street is where the fuel lives. Now, to the risk ledger dot. When storms bully the sea lanes, or a governor pads his pockets, the city's mood turns peppery. Bread gets lighter, tempers get heavier. Edicts fly. A prefect of the Annona earns his salary with math and prayer. More than once, emperors saved their statues by saving breakfast. If you want to hear politics without speeches, listen to a crowd when the ovens are late. The difference between Popina snacks and a riot can be 2 barges and a favorable wind. Step into a mill courtyard where the grindstone hums like a giant bee. Flour dust floats in sun columns. A boy sneezes a constellation. Someone laughs and blesses his nose in the name of Ceres. Women bring home shares to turn into batter, porridge, or the fierce little pancakes that keep children civil. Grain is the mother tongue of Rome Day in the life eating. Sauces and meats are dialects you add when fortune speaks up. At an inn, the cook's math begins with barley or spelt. A pot of lentils isn't a meal until grain makes it confident. A mutton stew isn't persuasive until barley thickens it into an argument you can hold with a spoon. That's why Capona meals taste like patience. Even travelers who dream of boar end up voting for bread and a second bowl. Roads may change your mind. Grain keeps your feet decided. Watch how grain smooths class without pretending to erase it. A senator buys white, sifted cloud light. A porter takes darker loaves with honest chew. Both tear from the same round when the stew is right. Even in the thermopodium culture, where speed is king, the hierarchy is mostly about garnish. The pot's backbone is democratic. When you bite a chickpea fritter and it satisfies louder than your budget, thank barley for showing up with a tie on. You ask a baker what bread is supposed to taste like and he shrugs a proverb. Like yesterday, plus judgment. Meaning, sour allowed to speak, but not to yell. Salt that keeps the crumb brave. Heat that kisses, not flirts. He raps an oven door, listening for the hollow note that says crust has become an address. It's not romance, it's rhythm. The everyday Roman diet is a drum line. Grain is the drum. By twilight, the sax whisper lower, and the city exhales. Counters will sing again. Dolia will mumble. 100 sources will practice their scales. And that's our next curiosity. If grain is the bass, what conducts the melody? Follow your nose toward the tang that made Romans write love letters with their eyes. Fermentation. In a few streets' time, the era changes accent, from warm crumb to briny thunder, and you'll understand why one amphora could turn a pot into poetry. Shall we walk where fish became language? Walk the river quarter at noon, and your nose will find the factories before your feet do. Stone vats sunning themselves, brine blinking in the light, and a salty bass note that turns heads and divides friendships. Fish and salt meet patience, timed as the rest. When lids lift, the air says one word in several dialects. Liquamen if you're polite, garum if you're hungry, alec if you're practical. Boys roll amphorae like drums toward waiting counters, and Rome's appetite answers like an audience that already knows the chorus. Sauce is vocabulary here, sentences of salt and thyme. Good houses brag with stamped amphorae, black letters promising origin, and grade the way wine merchants do today. Sharp cooks swear by garum, wine plus fish sauce. Thrifty ones bless alec, the thick thrumming paste, and every stall-keeper knows how a thumb's worth can make barley porridge. Sit up and sing. You learn to read the city by its bottles. Small for counters, tall for kitchens, secret for show-offs who collect prestige, like olives. Vinegar, acetum, keeps pace as the empire's editor. It brightens cabbage, tames onions, and disguises sins you'd rather eat than discuss. Boiled down, it becomes sapo, or defrutum, sticky and persuasive. A sweetness learned the hard way. Pickles line the curb like soldiers on leave. Cucumbers, leeks. Turnips dyed festival pink with beetroot. You sip posca and taste discipline. You watch a vendor splash vinegar across grilled leeks and understand mercy. Balance isn't fashion, it's survival. At the hot U-shaped counters, the lesson becomes lunch. A ladle of barley stew lands in your bowl. The keeper flicks a ripple of garum, and suddenly the pot remembers the sea. A smear of mortem rides shotgun, garlic and sheep's cheese mashed with mint and celery leaf. And the whole thing turns into an argument you're happy to lose. This is thermopodium culture at work. Speed, heat, and a finishing move, measured in heartbeats rather than minutes. Inside a humming popina, sauces play like a playlist. Mustard bites the sausage, vinegar steadies the liver, pepper sneezes starlight over grilled fish, and a shy smudge of Alec makes bread behave like dinner. Someone whispers about laser, the mythical silphium the Romans used up like a legend, and the keeper shrugs and reaches for asafoetida, the understudy that doesn't flub its lines. You eat standing because your knees can't be trusted to stay polite when the plate keeps winning. Alongside the colonnade, taberna stalls sell condiments the way poets sell adjectives. Mortars work the crowd, garlic surrendering to cheese, mint bruised into charm, celery leaf learning citizenship under oil. A spoonful costs a nod. A smear on bread costs a memory you'll revisit later. This is how the everyday Roman diet turns grain into theatre, not with boar and trumpets, but with a quiet glint at the rim of a dish. Watch a good cook taste. He taps a wooden spoon on terracotta like a metronome, pinches salt with 3 fingers, Roman measurement, perfectly scientific, and aims for the truce where fat, acid, salt, and heat quit arguing and start applauding. He'll tell you a stew isn't ready, it's listening. You try it and hear what he means. Garum hum below, vinegar brightness above, oil laying down velvet so the tongue doesn't bolt. Craft beats quantity every time. Sauces in Rome are also first aid by other means. Vinegar washes knives, rinses greens, and behaves like a gentleman in water when Posca fills work cups. A spoon of fish sauce folds protein into the poorest bowl without needing a priest or a pasture. You understand why ancient Roman street food leans salty. Salt is flavor, yes, but also contract. What keeps cabbage honest and crowds loyal? Economics hides in the jars. Amphorae arrive from Baetica and Africa with stamped pedigrees. Warehouse hills rise on the city's edge, made of old jars and yesterday's logistics. Cheap liquamen fuels counters. Finer grades flatter, elite kitchens. Both keep peace at breakfast. If Monte Testaccio is a mountain of broken pottery, it's also a monument to lunches that didn't fail. You don't need a Senate speech to explain stability, just an amphora that arrives on time. Class translates the same chemistry into different stories. A senator calls it garum sociorum and drips it onto red mullet. A porter calls it the good stuff and coaxes cabbage into generosity. In Rome day in the life eating, sauce is the Democrat that knows where you live but doesn't hold it against you. 1 drop redeems poor bread, 5 lavish a table. Both outcomes taste like somebody thought ahead. Of course there are tragedies. A fraudulent amphora turns rancid in a week. A counterman overdoses vinegar and teaches a whole street to wince. You learn the city's version of buyer beware. Trust your nose. Trust the stall with a line. Trust the cook whose spoon keeps time rather than excuses. Capona meals survive on that trust. The road is long, and the ladle must be honest. Your mouth knows before your mind drafts the complaint. Take one last walk with a heel of bread. Dip it in a cup where vinegar, oil, pepper, and a whisper of garum have just learned each's names, and feel the city reassemble. River, vat, amphora, counter, hand. Salt taught Rome to speak. Acid taught it to finish its sentences. And just as your tongue agrees that balance is the point, a new scent turns the corner. Pepper, cumin, coriander. Dry thunder from farther east. Follow that trail, and you'll meet the merchants who sold fire in grains and heat by the pinch, the spice ledgers that changed menus and court gossip, and the tiny black seeds that could tilt a supper from honest to memorable without raising their voice. Follow your nose off the river road and into the wedge of market, where merchants sell weather in little jars. The air hums with dry thunder, pepper, cumin, coriander, plus the faint sulk of asafoetida waiting to be misunderstood. You learn quickly that a spice stall is half apothecary, half theatre. Bronze scoops, waxed packets, scales delicate enough to weigh a rumour. Prices are posted, but everyone haggles like poets. This is Rome day in the life eating at its most precise. Flavour not by ladle, but by the pinch that fits between a promise and your thumb. Black pepper is the headliner, tiny planets in a clay bowl, dear enough to make accountants speak poetry. The vendor lets you crush one between teeth. Heat blooms not like firewood, but like an idea that refuses to sit down. In rich houses, it perfumes sauces for mullet and boar. At counters it turns cabbage honest, and lentils brave. You start to see why pepper slips into wills and dowries. It's not just spice, it's transferable confidence. A few berries can tilt a dish, a dinner, sometimes a deal. Cumin speaks lower, earthy, a little baritone, excellent at convincing chickpeas to taste like decisions. Coriander arrives with lemon opinions, seed warm and nutty, leaf bright and gossipy, when cooks can get it fresh. The keeper pinches each into your palm in turn. Then has you smell your own skin. Spices are portable geography. They make bread remember far places without moving its feet. That's the trick behind the everyday Roman diet. Grains and greens, then these map pins. You hear the silphium story again, told like a ghost tale for gourmands. A miraculous plant loved to extinction, leaving cooks with asafoetida, the reliable understudy that delivers funk and depth once you treat it kindly. Countermen wink when they use it, crushing a fleck into oil before it's allowed near your bowl. Oat stall sells mystery without lying. Jars labeled, sauces bragged, substitutions confessed. In a city allergic to fraud on an empty stomach, honesty tastes better than bravado. Watch how spices move through the ecosystem. At a thermopolium, the ladle is king, but the finishing pinch runs the kingdom. Pepper to finish grilled leeks, cumin to warm a barley stew, coriander to brighten a fish scrap folded in a chickpea pancake. In a papina, the playlist gets louder. Mustard bites sausage, asafoetida hums under liver. Pepper sneezes starlight over everything that wants to be remembered. Hapona keeps jars near the fire, not for show, but to make road food feel like hospitality instead of arithmetic. Adulteration is a sport everyone pretends to dislike. The honest merchant chews a peppercorn in front of you to prove it isn't juniper. The dishonest one perfumes sawdust and hopes your nose is new in town. You become a student of textures. Real cumin is oily when crushed. Real coriander sighs, citrus when bruised. The best stalls have lines not because they are cheap, but because they are correct. A city that can smell fraud at 10 paces sleeps better. Spice math is household finance with better perfume. A careful cook rations pepper like coin. 3 berries for a pot that feeds 6, 5 if the neighbor you owe a favor knocks. Coriander jar disappears faster in spring. Cumin lasts longer through winter stews. You begin to see how taberna stalls thrive on repeat customers. The vendor knows your budget by the way you hover before the third scoop. Loyalty programs were invented here. They were just called remembering your last recipe. Taste how spices settle the argument between salt and acid. Pepper gives vinegar something to push against. Cumin makes brine feel kinder. Coriander negotiates peace between garlic and oil. With the right pinch, a cheap bowl becomes a warm conversation. That's why ancient Roman street food feels smarter than its price. Firewood, patience, and a tiny jar of faraway weather-lifter city by the tongue. Etiquette reaches even the spice tray. You don't sneeze over the scoops. You step aside for a cook on a mission. You don't brag about asafoetida if you can't spell it. The keeper will grind to order if the line allows, mortar chiming like a tiny bell. You'll catch bits of advice handed out with change. Toast it first. Add at the end. Oil listens better than water. And realize these recipes travel faster than gossip. Spices also anchor memory. Pepper takes you back to last year's feast. Cumin smells like a winter you survived. Coriander snaps you straight to a spring afternoon when the baths were too hot and the wine too resinous. Food is a ledger. Spices are the annotations that help you read past yourself. In the everyday Roman diet, they're less about heat than about punctuation. Where to pause, where to finish, where to laugh. For a small indulgence, watch a wine merchant drift by with a chest of miracles. Peppered wine for the bold, myrtle-tinged for the genteel. Honeyed for people who said they wouldn't and did. A few berries in a cup, and even a tired afternoon pretends to be a feast. This is luxury scaled for the street. No couch required, just a steady wrist and a generous friend willing to share. Pocket your purchase. A twist of pepper, a paper of cumin, coriander seeds sealed with wax and the vendor's thumbprint. The whole parcel weighs less than an apple and promises more than some banquets do. As you step back into the flow of carts and gossip, another scent corrals your attention. Smoke and brine together, the orchestra from the fish market, tuning up for its evening performance. If salt taught the city to speak, and spices taught it to sing, what happens when the sea shows up with percussion? The answer waits where scales clack, knives flash, and sardines make liars of people who say they don't like crowds. Follow the clatter of scales and the knife song that rides the evening air. Under awnings striped like tidy waves, slabs of marble sweat with crushed ice and brine, and fish lie in ranks. Sardines like commas, mackerel with opera gloss, red mullet blushing, as if flattered by your stare. Ostia's boats have only just shrugged off the Tiber. Porters still smell of rope and salt. The first rule here is nose first, purse second. If the air reads clean, ocean, iron, lemon, you're safe to fall in love. A fishmonger flips a sardine as if turning a page, salts lightly with fingers that have forgotten how not to be precise, and tosses it to a boy who runs to the brazier 2 stalls down. This is Rome day in the life eating at its quickest. Procurement, fire, bite, grin. The boy slaps fish on a grill, brushes with oil that remembers last week's rosemary, and hands you a plank of bread to catch the drippings. One breath later, you understand why markets write their own prayers. Not every catch is tonight's theatre. Some are tomorrow's insurance. In the salsamentari shops, bellies of tuna and mackerel are salted into a future you can slice, while anchovies stack into ceramic like well-behaved citizens. A clerk inks amphory bound for taberna stalls and kitchens that plan further than a single hunger. Preservation here isn't a compromise, it's a second vocabulary. When a stew needs spine, a single salted scrap teaches it grammar. Around the corner, shellfish chatter in baskets, mussels flexing like show-offs, oysters pretending civilization was invented for them. A vendor shucks fast enough to make gossip jealous, flicks a drizzle of vinegar, and dusts pepper so delicate you doubt it happened until the afterglow votes yes. No couches, no liars, just ancient Roman street food staging a banquet on your thumb. The shell piles behind the stall look like the city counting its small victories. If you need heat that speaks in complete sentences, find the friar whose oil smells of good decisions. He dusts tiny fish in coarse crumbs and cumin, kisses them in the pan, then dumps the whole confetti into a cone of parchment. You walk away crunching thunder. A squeeze of citron edits the fat without scolding it. A pinch of coriander seed turns cheap into cheerful. The everyday Roman diet wins like this, by 1,000 clever endings. Saucemen here are minor priests. One mixes oenogarum, wine and fish sauce, until it shines like a rumor you want to believe. Another grinds moretum toward the sea, folding in a shy streak of alec, so depth hums under garlic and mint. A smear on bread, a dip for your fried fish, and suddenly a 5 asses supper tastes like it has opinions about poetry. That's thermopodium culture with wet feet. Fast hands finishing faster. Watch buyers read fish like letters. Clear eyes, tight bellies, gills the color of persuasion. A matron taps a mullet and listens for firmness the way a baker listens for hollow crust. A cook inhales near the spine and nods. A sailor laughs at amateurs and buys sardines because sardines are honest. A stall with a line is a school. You learn more in 5 minutes than a speech could teach you in an hour. Back of stall braziers turn commerce into supper. Skewers of eel, lacquered with vinegar, little kebabs of liver and fish belly that shouldn't work and entirely do, and fillets pinned to sticks, painted with oil, pepper, and celery leaf. Papina across the lane, raids the market and plates louder, grilled mackerel under pickled leeks, sausage with mustard, and a side of anchovy-crusted bread, watered wine that lets the jokes land on both feet. Eat, argue, forgive, the three-act play of Papina snacks. Travellers drift into a door painted with a weathered dolphin, the local Capona that knows roads end in bowls. Tonight the pot sings of lentils with a salted fish whisper, barley thickened until spoons stand with pride, and a fish stew peppered with decisions and cumin. You ladle twice without ceremony. No peacock, no parade, just Capona meals that persuade your legs to believe in distance again. Economics sits in plain sight. A senator's steward orders mullet by the tray and peppers by the fist. A porter buys sardines and spends the saved coin on walnuts for the children. A widow takes mussels because mussels forgive budgets and reward patience. Same sea, different stories. That's the contract of Rome Day in the life eating, dignity available in small correct portions. Etiquette is salted into the scene. You don't mock a bargain fish. You do step aside for the woman with a striggle mark still pink from the baths. You don't haggle after the knife has kissed the fillet. The keeper's raised eyebrow carries more law than a tablet. When dice appear, the spoon taps terracotta twice, and luck goes back in its pocket. Markets govern themselves when supper is at stake. As torches take the light from the sun, knives slow, and the last sardine hisses like punctuation. You walk away with oil on your fingers, and the sea on your breath, a small triumph folded in bread. In a few streets, the smoke changes flavor. Less brine, more boar. Less citron, more bay. The city's appetite turns from silver to red, from scales to crackling, and the air itself grows heavier, like a drumline warming its wrists. Follow that bass note and you'll find spits, stew pots and sausages arguing their cases to a jury of noses. Wouldn't be fair to ignore them, would it? Follow the clang of cleavers and the smell of bay burning down to a sweet green smoke. Under the porticos the Macellum, Rome's meat market, runs like a drill team, marble slabs sweating, gutters whispering away rinse water, hooks ticking as haunches settle. You don't browse here, you negotiate with appetite. A butcher lifts a shoulder, taps the bone with a practiced knuckle, and quotes a price that includes his opinion of your sandals. This is Rome Day in the life eating when it wants bass notes, fat that crackles, juices that make bread behave, and a fire that knows the difference between kiss and scorch. Look closely, and you'll see class translated into cuts. A steward buys pale pork loin for a house that likes its plates to talk softly. A mason takes ribs that promise louder sentences. A widow points at belly because belly never lies. Everything's cold to the touch from morning shade and quick hands. Vinegar sits in shallow bowls to bless knives and rinse fingers. Sprigs of bay ride home in bundles like signatures. The everyday Roman diet puts meat in the role of soloist, not orchestra. Grains carry the tune. A few ounces of pork teach it swagger. Sausages are the market's stand-up comedians, loud, versatile, and impossible to ignore. Lucanicae pop in their skins like punctuation, heavy with pepper and fennel. Botellus, blood sausage, brings iron and garlic that make knees reconsider their opinions. Stall keepers coil links into terracotta pans and charter them out to nearby grills by the yard. 20 paces away, a boy spears 3 coins worth and baptizes them with mustard. Call them Papina snacks if you like. They're also portable optimism, always where thrift and bravado clasp hands. Livers dusted with lavish kidneys coaxed under a spoon of hot vinegar. Tripes sweet-talked with mint and cumin until even skeptics nod. A good counter keeps skewers moving, so none of it has time to become theory. You taste a cube that once had a complicated job and discover its learned leisure. That's ancient Roman street food at its finest, turning problem parts into applause with nothing but heat, herbs, and nerve. Spits rotate in slow, hypnotic unison, guide pork shoulders, birds truss tight, while bay twigs smolder like green incense. Bread planks wait under the spit to catch drippings, then sellers prize contraband to anyone with sense and hunger. The grill man flips a thin chop onto your plank, slaps a palmful of salt, and flicks defrutum. Wine boiled to syrup, for a glaze that tastes like summer trying to get away with something. If thermopodium culture is a drumbeat, the spit is its low note. Sauces do the persuading. Mustard ground fresh in a marble mortar, vinegar honed with honey, oenogarum swirled to a shine, so meat remembers the sea. Pepper sneezes starlight over every cut, cumin warms shadows, coriander decides you can have brightness without apology. The trick, always, is restraint. Meat is dear, spice is dearer. The everyday Roman diet wins by finishing moves, not monologues. 2 pinches, 1 splash, and the world nods yes. No plate stands alone. Cabbage edited with vinegar, leeks melted into olive oil, chickpeas fried into little golden arguments, side dishes that turn a chop into supper. A pickle man opens jars like a catalogue, turnips dyed festival pink, cucumbers that snap like new promises. Stamina stalls orbit the grills, each offering the one small thing that makes your hand-built plate feel like it had a meeting beforehand. You'll learn etiquette by osmosis. Don't bargain after the knife has kissed the cut. Offer the warm plank under the spit to the midwife who got here on tired feet. Dice are fine until the wooden spoon taps terracotta twice. The grill keeps order by heat alone. Regulars enforce the rest with eyebrows. This is the city legislating appetite in real time. Law that smells of pepper and beeswax. Preservation hums behind the spectacle. Hams salt their way toward winter. Bacon sleeps in smoke. Dried sausages become wages you can slice. A cart rattles past, with hooks of meat headed for roadside inns and building sites where a dozen laborers will treat slices like bonuses. Credit tabs exist, chalk on a beam. The butcher's memory, your promise to bring coin on market day. Rome day in life eating is stitched with ias and honest returns. At the inn around the corner, pots vote slow. Pork with prunes and leeks thickened by barley, mutton that learned tenderness because patience had the ladle, beans steadying the bowl. These Capona meals don't flirt, they provide. Travellers trade milestones over steam. A clerk with ink on his sleeves chooses stewed over grilled because tomorrow looks long. Meat as punctuation again. Important, brief, unforgettable. Safety isn't a sermon, it's technique. Shade, speed, rinsed blades, quick fires. Vinegar kisses boards. Salt makes surfaces hostile to things you don't want to name while you're chewing. Counters that survive do so, because their noses and reputations are never off duty. In a city without refrigerators, thermopolium culture is a choreography of minutes, and you can taste when a stall keeps time. When the smoke thins and your fingers remember they're yours, sweetness drifts in from the far edge of the square. Honey warming in a pan, sesame waking under a baker's palm, figs splitting into laughter. Meat has made its case. Now the hand wants to close gently. Somewhere, a vendor rattles walnuts like applause. Somewhere, a boy turns a pan of cheese fritters until the honey shines like evening on the Tiber. If you've still got a spare coin and an honest appetite, follow that glow. Your day isn't done until a small, sweet thing teaches your jaw to relax. When the meat smoke thins, another perfume takes the square by the hand. Warm honey, toasted sesame, a shy whiff of cinnamon that may actually be bay pretending. The clang of cleavers yields to the soft hiss of shallow pans. Vendors trade tongs for ladles. Benches draw closer. You're not hungry, exactly. You're curious, which is the more Roman impulse. Lamps pick out gold on pastries and beads of syrup on crusts, and every conversation lowers its voice the way people do in a room with candles. First to audition, are globi, cheese fritters the size of a generous walnut. A woman with the forearms of a goddess turns curd and semolina into spheres, kisses them with oil, then baptizes each with a ribbon of honey that catches torchlight like polished brass. Sesame frets across the top and crackles under your teeth. Pepper winks in the afterglow because Rome refuses to let sweet travel without a chaperone. This is ancient Roman street food doing dessert. Quick, hot, persuasive. Next comes libum, the curd cake that knows two audiences. Household gods first, you second. A thin leaf burns underneath to perfume the crumb. A sheen of honey writes a final line across the top. The bite is tender as a promise and heavier than it looks, the kind of sweet that makes plans for you. In the everyday Roman diet, sugar as we know it is rare. Honey is the scribe that writes, enough. Dates arrive with a secret stitched inside, walnut or almond, and a pinch of pepper that turns the ending into a conversation. Rolled in sesame, they look like the night sky learned manners. A tavern boy offers two on a skewer and calls them good decisions. He isn't wrong. Even the Peppina snacks crowd, loyal to salt and smoke, buys a pair for the walk, which is Roman for I'm still listening. Nuts run the perimeter. Walnuts that crack like small verdicts. Almonds that learned poetry somewhere near Spain. Pine nuts that taste like a rich friend's garden. A taberna stall tumbles them through a warm pan with defrutum. Wine boiled down to syrup, until they gloss like a lie you're willing to forgive. They travel well, earn quiet in children, and turn a plain heel of bread into dessert when tomorrow is stingy. Fruit merchants edit the season. Figs split themselves with pride. Grapes slump in bowls like successful senators. Pomegranates show their jeweled ledgers with a cough of juice. Apples and pears wait for the knife that reveals who they've decided to be. Dried figs and raisins extend summer into a treaty with winter. This is Rome day in the life eating as calendar. Nothing fancy, everything correct. Cups join the chorus. Some wine married to honey softens tongues. Passum, the raisin wine, tells longer stories in fewer sips. A resin-tinged table wine smells faintly of pine and amphora and knows exactly which olives to flirt with. Posca stays in the conversation because vinegar can settle a stomach that's been generous with itself. Thermopodium culture understands that the end of a meal is not a stop sign. It's a landing. Back at the ovens, sweet breads take their last bow. Rings braided with sesame and anise, loaves painted with defrutum until they shine. Little seed biscuits you can count while someone finishes a joke. The baker keeps a plank under the rack to collect drips of honey and oil. He sells the plank in narrow slices to people who understand gratitude. You hold a warm strip, like a passport stamp tomorrow. Watch how sweetness organizes a small republic. A vendor presses a fritter into a watchman's palm without charging. A midwife gets the first of the new batch because gods take notes. A child who swept the stall earlier receives a date and a salute. Etiquette here is edible. Give sweetness where it will multiply. The everyday Roman diet saves sermons for temples and argues kindness with pastries. Of course, the market has its shadows. Honey can be watered. Saffron can be false. Imported spices can travel with stories that don't add up. The cure is the old Roman trinity: nose, line, reputation. Stalls with smoke and waiting customers are safer than stalls with speeches. Eyes get chalked on a beam. The beekeeper's name travels in compliments. Taberna stalls survive on trust. You can taste. Sweets have their own little pharmacy. Quince paste steadies tempers and bread. Pears poached with a sigh of vinegar and a whisper of pepper behave like medicine that forgot to be sad. Fennel seeds after the last bite reframe the evening as a wise decision. At the inn, Copona meals close with a modest apple and a cup of warm spiced wine that says, "Walk home, you'll live." Rome, likes endings that can get up early. The square cools. Beeswax softens on wicks. Sandals remember their owners. The last sesame ring goes to someone who clearly needed it. You tuck a small parcel, 2 nuts, a date, a heel brushed with syrup, into your cloak with the care of a letter, and the city signs off with a friendly clatter of buckets at a fountain. Somewhere nearby, a ladle meets a cup, and the night remembers it has one more voice. The drinks that argued for moderation all day finally ask for their solo. If your hand is still curious, follow the sound of watered wine, spiced cups, and the little copper measure that decides how loud an evening should be. Follow the sound of copper measures kissing clay, and you'll find the drink line exactly where the evening decides how brave to be. A water seller posts up by a fountain, dipping from a basin that owes its clarity to aqueducts marching in from the hills. His neighbor works from amphory, propped at an angle, resin-scented stoppers winking in torchlight. Between them sits the small parliament of the street. A row of ladles, syathi, a stack of cups, a boy with quick arithmetic. This is Rome Day in the life eating in its liquid dialect. Moderation by design, not by lecture. Start with Posca, the people's compromise. Vinegar and water isn't poetry, but it's honest and faithful, the drink equivalent of a loyal mule. Soldiers swore by it, laborers lined up for it, and bathgoers grabbed it because clean bodies crave tart discipline. A dusting of fennel seed turns the edge into brightness. A shard of ice from the fishmonger's stash, don't ask, makes the cup behave like a cool head. In the grammar of the everyday Roman diet, Posca is punctuation that keeps paragraphs from running on. Honeyed wine, malsum, speaks more suavely. The vendor warms a basin with a finger width of hot water, swirls in young wine and honey until the seams disappear, and pours with the confidence of someone who's seen arguments end in laughter. You don't gulp, you sip and let the bees remind your tongue what summer promised. Paired with papina snacks, liver with lavish, or those little sausages that snap like punctuation. Malsum turns fatigue into conversation that doesn't need to win. Then there's calda, hot water whisked into wine with a pinch of pepper, a frill of bay, maybe a breath of myrtle. On damp nights, it behaves like a blanket you can drink. Street philosophers love it because steam fogs up certainty, and certainty is the enemy of jokes. Thermopodium culture keeps a pot ready for people who learned the hard way that cold wine and cold moods travel as a set. You'll notice wine is almost never neat. It's cut with water, tamed with honey, seasoned with herbs, because Romans distrusted naked excess and preferred craftsmanship over conquest in a cup. Ratios matter. 1 ladle wine to 3 ladles water, if you intend to bargain later. 2 to 3 if a friend just came home from a long road. The measure is the moral here. Quantity that admits it wants to keep mornings possible. That's how ancient Roman street food and drink learned to share a conscience. Smell the amphorae before you brag. Some wines carry pine from pitch-lined jars, a resinous whisper that learned patience on the journey. Others are young and jumpy, eager to be taught manners by bay or honey. A good seller lets you taste a drop on your wrist. Skin is an honest judge before he lifts the ladle. He marks your cup with a scratched notch, a promise to refill to the line. In a city that loves contracts, a cup line is law you can drink. Etiquette threads through the queue like a reed through a basket. You offer the first sip to the person who told the day's best story. You step aside for damp hair fresh from the baths. You do not heckle a drink you cannot pronounce. Dice appear, and the keeper taps terracotta twice to remind Fortune she has a bedtime. Tabernacle stalls nearby harmonize. Nuts, sesame rings, pickled turnips. So salt and crunch keep wine from auditioning for tragedy. Pairings here aren't status games, they're tactics. Posca with fried fish to tidy grease, Malsum with cheese fritters globy, because honey knows its kin. Resin-tinged table wine with grilled leeks and mustard, because pine and brass like each other. Ask the counterboy for bread under drippings and a skewer. Watch him pour a cup that matches the plate, like old friends meeting in the street. The everyday Roman diet doesn't chase decadence. It chases balance it can afford. Measures keep mischief on a schedule. A Cyathus ladle is roughly a mouthful. 6 make a sextarius. The boy with the fast hands and honest eyes is the difference between a merry corner and a disappointed morning. He writes credit in chalk on a beam. 2 Cyathi here, 1 there. And he remembers who pays when pride cools. In the ecosystem of taberna stalls, trust is a currency with better interest than any banker. Not all cup sing. Some scold on purpose. Bitter infusions, wormwood rue, get dosed as digestives by aunties who have seen things. Warm water with a slip of defrutum. Boiled wine syrup, Cosset's palates that worked too hard on pepper and bravado. A handful of fennel seeds at the end reframes the evening as prudence that happened to be pleasant. Even Capona meals know when to pour softly, finishing a traveller's stew with calm rather than courage. The police of the evening are informal and effective. A wooden spoon tapped twice on terracotta, an eyebrow that means, water, friend. A ladle held just above the line, until a joke lands kindly. Disorder is bad for receipts. And so the room teaches itself a rhythm: pour, bite, laugh, breathe, repeat. Rome day in the life eating doesn't deny celebration. It rehearses it until it behaves. When the lamp oil thins and sandals look like they've found their rightful owners, cups get rinsed in vinegar and stacked, amphorae tipped upright like soldiers at rest. You tuck a sesame ring into your cloak. Feel honey tack slightly against your palm. Hot bread in a warm hand, even now. And the street exhales towards sleep without quite believing in it. Somewhere a baker turns a millstone. Somewhere a widow stirs a pot for the last hungry soul. And the city, satisfied, promises breakfast without putting its hand on its heart. Before steam rises, hands do. A baker's apprentice wakes the millstone with a shove, wrists salted white by yesterday. A sauce seller unlocks a shutter with a prayer he never admits is a prayer. A porter rubs rope, burns into readiness, and hopes the river behaves. Rome's menu is written by bodies that learned patience, fingers that can read dough, noses that can spot a lie in oil, shoulders that remember the weight of sacks even in dreams. Rome day in the life eating begins as choreography long before a single ladle sings. End of a song long before a single ladle sings. Watch the thermopolium owner count his morning, wood stacked by thickness, embers banked to hold temper. Dolia checked like sleeping children. He tastes yesterday's barley with today's mint and decides the pot has forgiven him. A U-shaped counter looks simple from the customer side. From the working side, it's a cockpit. Heat here, cold there, vinegar near the knives, garum far from the gossip. That's thermopolium culture as craft. Predictable warmth bending chaos into lunch. Apprentices learn by doing and by being laughed at kindly. The first day, they burn a chickpea pancake. The second day, they burn 2. On the third, they learn to listen for the hinge in the sizzle where batter turns into bread. The master taps the rim, once for flip, twice for weight, and the boy starts hearing vowels in heat. Food schooling is loud, fragrant, and progressive. You pass your course when regulars stop watching your hands and start trusting your wrists. At the taberna stalls, economy is a duet. Shopkeeper's ledger in charcoal, customer's credit in memory. A walnut seller reads character by how you test a nut. Too hard a squeeze, you haggle fiercely. A polite press, you pay on time. The olive woman stains her fingernails the color of loyalty and gives extra brine to people who return her jars. Commerce in Rome isn't faceless. It has laugh lines and elbows. The everyday Roman diet is seasoned with familiarity as much as with salt. Clang into the macellum where butchers make philosophy with knives. They calibrate sharpness with a thumb's whisper, wipe blades with vinegar, and aim at that human truce between thrift and glory. Offal isn't charity, it's competence. A stall's reputation rests on the seconds as much as the primes. How kidneys get their bath, how lungs learn pepper, how belly becomes poetry when the fire is stern but fair. Even Peppina snacks depend on these backstage deals. The skewer you love was negotiated at dawn. Cooks are conductors. With one hand they manage fire's mood swings. With the other they edit time. A stew that forgives lateness, a sauce that can wait, a flatbread that must not. They speak shorthand, listening for broth that's almost ready, polite for an oil that's hot enough, honest for a wine that won't backstab vinegar. In a city where speeches can be long and roads longer, ancient Roman street food succeeds, because cooks make seconds count. The water boys are unsung magistrates. They know which fountains run cold at noon, which cisterns sulk in heat, which marble basins collect shade like treasure. Their cups, scrubbed with sand and rinsed in vinegar, keep colds from becoming rumors. Oscar sellers respect them, wine sellers court them, bath crowds depend on them. Hydration is logistics with good manners, and logistics is how empires avoid embarrassing fainting episodes. Women run half the city's appetite with one hand and 3 errands. Midwives cut lines rightly. Widows own windows that sell the lentil that saves a shift. Mothers teach children to count by olives and debts by sesame rings. They know when a stall is lying because smell doesn't care about salesmanship. When a capona needs extra hands, when a thermopolium overheats, when a neighbor's bread fails to rise, they appear with opinions and ladles. The ledger records coin, the street records favors. Credit is chalk. A beam above the counter remembers more than any clerk. 2 loaves for Lucius, paid Friday. 6 Siethi for Marcus, paid in laughter, and a promise to carry wood tomorrow. Debts are social, not merely financial. Default isn't just arithmetic, it's embarrassment. That's why taberna stalls survive panic weather and thin months. They trade in trust, and trust, once salted, keeps better than meat. Smell is the inspector nobody can bribe. Good counters smell like heat and intention. Oh, that's been busy. Wood that worked hard. Vinegar that keeps a humble pride. Bad ones smell like excuses. Regulars enforce standards with a raised eyebrow, or worst, with their feet headed elsewhere. Law wanders the market now and then. Reputation patrols hourly. In the everyday Roman diet, enforcement comes on the breeze. Between rushes the street eats too. The sausage man trades a link for a ladle of barley. The baker swaps a crust plank basted in drippings for pickled turnips. The olive seller slips a handful to the boy who runs amphory like a hero. The city feeds itself in loops, energy converting to kindness and back to energy. You can map Rome day in the life eating as arrows on a chart. Or you can watch a tired porter laugh over a cup and understand more quickly. When festivals paint the calendar in vermilion, all this craft goes into overdrive. Dolls rehearse their decorations. Spice jars get front row seats. Sweet sellers double honey and double gossip. Processions need routes. Processions need snacks. Processions need the people who can keep a fire steady while drums try to steal their timing. If you've ever wondered how a city throws a feast without tripping on its own sandals, follow the aprons. They already know where the crowds will be hungry, and when the trumpets will make vinegar jump. The garlands are pretty. The hands are the miracle. Festivals repaint the appetite. Streets get swept, altars combed, and garlands hung where yesterday only laundry dared. Trumpets pull the city into one long inhalation, and suddenly every smell becomes louder. Bay smoking on braziers, honey warming, pepper waking like flint. Vendors who usually play solo now form a band. Skewers, fritters, pickles, cups. It's the everyday Roman diet wearing jewelry. Same bones, brighter wrists. You fall in step with the crowd because that's how hunger learns the program. Watch the priests for the route. Watch the aprons for the menu. Before the procession, cooks rehearse speed. A thermopolium pushes its dolia to the lip of the counter, lids propped like cymbals. Barley stew, chickpea batter, cabbage with vinegar and a temper. The set list that never forgets its chords. The keeper assigns one hand to ladle, one to garnish, and a third that only veterans have to keep the coins honest. When the first chant rolls by, bowls leave, as if tugged by string. You grab one. The garum flash turns your bowl maritime, and your breath remembers why salt is the language of crowds. Offerings set the day's flavor. At a street shrine, someone lays a small libum on a leaf, curd cake for the laris, then buys its larger, unapologetic cousin for the family. Smoke lifts like handwriting. A priest blesses grapes into public property. Honey drips into the future. Ancient Roman street food borrows the choreography. What begins as sacred ends as second helpings. Piety keeps a hand over the pot so greed doesn't stick its face too close. Generosity answers with an extra fig on the plate. Some festivals are confetti. Some are thunder. Saturnalia flips manners upside down. Caps on, jokes legal, debt briefly placed in a drawer, and food follows suit. Papina snacks go playful. Sausages tucked into bread that pretends to be a purse. Nuts sugared with defrutum so even stoics grin. Dates with pepper because sweetness should never travel alone. Wine is cut, yes, but with honey that makes the city forgive itself for being noisy. Laughter heats faster than brazier coals. You let it cook your edges. Floralia smirks into spring with color and mischief. Stalls garnish themselves. Radishes carved into applause. Lettuces fanned like gossip. Peas popped into mouths mid-walk. Cheese fritters. Globy, get a wreath of petals, because why should temples hoard all the flowers? A taberna stall hawks mortem with mint shamelessly forward, and even cabbage gets flirtatious under vinegar. This is Rome day in the life eating set to a higher tempo. Restraint shows up late and finds no seats. Tracer logistics as theater. Streets choke on laurel and news. Soldiers march hungry in neat lines of dust. Spectators negotiate elbows and perspective. The smart counters pre-plate. Bread planks under spit drippings stacked like tiles. Pickled turnips already blushing in bowls. Chickpea pancakes folded, ready to receive whatever the gods and butchers send. A capona near the root does brisk trade in lentils and barley. Because victory talks big, but bellies vote for continuity. Even the fishmongers stage a parade. Sardines arrive like a silver argument. Mackerel flash opera gloss. Oysters practice humility they do not feel. Portable fryers hiss at the curb. Citron and pepper officiate. A plank of bread catches the vows. You learn that festivals don't invent menus. They speed them up and put them under brighter lamps. The thermopodium culture you met at dawn now proves it can feed a moving target without spilling its soul. Rules bend, but the city still polices itself with eyebrows and wooden spoons. Dice stay legal until the spoon taps terracotta twice. Line cutting earns a theatrical sigh and a slice offered to the last person waiting as reparation. A watchman gets the first hot loaf from the oven because lamps are a kind of miracle too. The best stalls post prices where noise can't hide them. That's how taberna stalls survive the crush. Transparency louder than trumpets. Children run logistics with sticky hands. They shuttle cups, ferry nuts, hold places in line that transform into olives at settlement. A midwife materializes at 3 counters at once. A baker's boy threads the crowd with a basket stamped for 10 stairwells. Debts get chalked on beams even today, because not everyone carries coin to a procession, but everybody eats. Rome day in the life eating becomes social glue you can chew. Flavor memory hoards these days. Pepper will always taste a little like drums. Honey will keep a rumor of lamp smoke. Vinegar will remember a chant you never learned the words to. Later, when streets are broom swept and sandals know their owners again, you'll bite a sesame ring and feel the echo of cymbals in your jaw. That's the dividend festivals pay. Not excess, but resonance. Food becomes a postcard from a crowd you briefly belong to. Toward evening, when wreaths droop and priests sound mortal, stalls pivot from parade to late supper. Sausages retire their jokes. Lentils return to serious work. Wine remembers water. A capona meal steadies travelers who miss their road while watching gods go by. In back rooms, bread under drippings becomes the kind of diplomacy even silence can sign. The city lowers its voice without losing its appetite. When torches shrink to pinpoints and beeswax remembers bed, the last ladle paints the last bowl, and someone scrubs a counter with vinegar that smells like a bowl taking its encore. Balance. Some sticky, some sincere, hang in doorways. A stray grape leads you home like a polite breadcrumb. You pocket a small sweet for morning and feel the calendar reset in your chest. Somewhere, a quiet question forms. After parades and permission, what does ordinary taste like again? And the answer, like bread, will be waiting warm at first light. Before the city remembers its name, a millstone turns, a shutter lifts, and a boy tests the oven with his palm. Night hands the street back to morning, and the loop begins. Grain to dough, dough to bread, bread to people who make the rest of Rome plausible. If you listen closely, you can hear yesterday humming in today, the last sesame ring you tucked away, the vinegar that steadied your cup, the pepper that still pricks the back of your throat when a cart hits a rut. This is Rome day in the life, eating as heartbeat, steady and practical, more choreography than spectacle. Let's retire a glamorous lie while the light is kind. Romans didn't recline through life nibbling dormice. Most stood, walked, bargained, built, and ate between verbs. Ancient Roman street food wasn't a curiosity. It was infrastructure, running on heat, habit, and small coins. Counters worked because time was expensive. Bowls worked because they told the truth. Grain first, attitude second. When reclining did happen, it was theatre. The city ate upright, with a hand on its day. Health lived in technique, more than in medical theory. Hot things were hot, sour things were useful, salty things were honest. Knives rinsed in vinegar, cups scoured with sand, ladles kept moving so food didn't linger where chance grows teeth. The everyday Roman diet protected itself by flavour. Brine tamed vegetables, acid trimmed grease, smoke gave meat a winter. You didn't need to name microbes to keep them uncomfortable. You needed water that moved, pots that boiled, and vendors who believed in both. Class made itself known in garnish and pace, not in whether you ate. A senator's steward bought pale loaves and pepper by the fist. A porter bought darker bread and let cumin and vinegar do the work. Yet both met at the same counters, listened for the same sizzle, and recognized the same ethics. A line is a line. A posted price is a posted promise. A Napoleon culture was the city's quiet social contract. Speed without chaos, warmth without speeches, and a ladle that treated coins fairly. Economy hid in chalk and memory. Tabs on beams, ios that tasted of trust, 2 extra olives for the woman who returned jars clean. Taberna stalls survived thin months, because they kept score in favours as much as in asses. A good stall owner was part grocer, part banker, part village, remembering who owed bread, who had a new baby, who needed cabbage priced like mercy. The market looked loud. Underneath, it was gentle arithmetic. Taste was also geography. Amphorae rolled in carrying seas and hills. Garum humming from the coast, resin-tinged wine confessing its jars, pepper arriving like weather from farther east. Spices didn't shout so much as annotate. Pepper as starlight, cumin as warmth, coriander as a lemon memory. Sauces were grammar. Vinegar as comma, oil as conjunction, fish sauce as the clause that made a sentence make sense. That's how Peppina snacks could be small and feel complete, each bite properly punctuated. Work wrote the menu. Bakers fed dawn. Fishmongers argued with noon. Butchers dominated the late afternoon. Sweet sellers dimmed the day with honey glow. Bath crowds created their own orbit of sesame rings and moratum. Theatres their own rhythm of fritters and wine cut to reason. Capona meals caught travellers the way harbours catch boats. Lentils, barley, and a second ladle that turned tomorrow from a threat into an itinerary. Time wasn't just a clock. It was a spice. Women and children kept the engine kind. Widows ran windows that never let a shift end hungry. Midwives skipped lines with the consent of entire streets. Kids worked logistics with sticky hands and honest grins, ferrying cups and holding places in exchange for nuts. The everyday Roman diet had many authors, but the edits that made it tender were often theirs. The first crust to a watchman, the warm plank under drippings to a tired mother, an extra fig slipped without ceremony, ritual stitched appetite to meaning, a curd cake for the Lars before a larger one for the family, a splash of wine to the hearth before a cup for your own patience, a saved crust at night like a promise to morning. Festivals brightened what was already there. More color, more laughter, same bones. Food carried blessings both ways. Offerings dignified hunger. Meals kept the gods from feeling ignored. Nothing was wasted, not even gratitude. What does all this leave on your modern tongue? Perhaps the simple arithmetic that still rescues days. Heat, acid, salt and time. Grain first, then bragging. The kindness of a ladle that meets a bowl on time. You recognize the echo in your world. Take out windows, market lines, the genius of soup after long hours, the mercy of water cut with something tart. Ancient Roman street food didn't vanish. It franchised itself into habits you already keep without giving them Latin names. If you're still chasing a moral, it fits in one hand like everything else we've eaten. Eat for the work you do. Season for the mood you need. Share so the city stays livable. When money is short, skill matters. When time is short, counters matter. When patience is short, vinegar and a friend. That's the city's whispered syllabus, taught at every brazier and beam of chalk. No manifestos, only meals that make mornings possible. And so the loop resets. A watchman chews the last sesame ring. A baker leans on a warm paddle and listens for the hollow knock of a perfect crust. A sauce seller dreams in garlic and mint. You slip a heel of bread into your cloak for dawn, and feel the streets say goodnight without losing interest in tomorrow. If you're hungry to test the whole circuit in one go, no couches, just courage, there's a game the city's been playing forever. Follow steam, follow laughter, pay attention, and let chance pick the stall. Shall we spin the wheel and eat like locals, one bite at a time? If you've walked this whole day with me, from flower-dusted dawn to honey-lit midnight, you can feel it in your hands, the slight shine of oil, the ghost of vinegar, the warmth of a loaf that behaved like a promise. The real Rome didn't live on marble speeches, it lived on reach and bite moments. Ancient Roman street food passed across a counter, a nod, and a story shorter than a ladle strip. That's the quiet miracle we've watched up close, a city that kept millions upright with choreography, not spectacle. Look how simple the engine really was. Grain, heat, salt, acid, and time. The everyday Roman diet trusted that arithmetic. Barley and wheat carried the work. Vinegar edited excess. Garum whispered the sea into poor bowls. Pepper drew a bright line under the sentence. Around those stunts moved human agreements. Lines that meant fairness. Posted prices that meant peace. A wooden spoon tapped twice when dice forgot their manners. The counters weren't just kitchens. They were social contracts you could taste. And the people. Always the people. Bakers writing sunrise into crust. Fishmongers reading gills like letters. Butchers turning problem parts into applause. Widows at windows ladling out mercy by the bowl. Kids running logistics with sticky hands and honest grins. Thermopolian culture taught speed without chaos. Taberna stalls taught trust with change. Peppina snacks taught laughter to share a bench with caution. Capona meals taught roads to end in steadiness. Wherever you stood, someone's craft kept you from falling through the day. If there's a myth we've retired, let it stay retired. Most Romans didn't recline through life in silk. They ate standing, between verbs, build, carry, haggle, wash, walk, sing, forgive. Rome Day in the life eating was not decadence, it was competence. Heat was clean, sour was smart, salt was honest, and timing was everything. The health rules hid inside flavor. You didn't need a lecture when lamb met vinegar, and your stomach said, "Yes, that." Pay that forward. In your city, which storefront is your thermopolium, the place that feeds you fast and fair? What's your modern posca when the afternoon wobbles? Lemon water, strong tea, a brisk walk that edits your thoughts, which one pinch turns thrift into triumph in your kitchen. Pepper, citrus, a handful of herbs, a friend at the table. And where do you see the old Roman chalk on a beam? Tabs built on trust, a free extra for the tired, the first crust for the person who keeps the lights safe. Tell me in the comments. I want to map today's counters to yesterday's streets. Which bite surprised you most? The chickpea pancake, the fish crisped to thunder, the dates with pepper. Where in your town have you seen a line that means, "This is the honest place"? What home trick of yours turns leftovers into a second, better act? If you ran a stall for a day, what would you serve to keep a crowd kind? Share this episode with someone who loves cities the way Rome loved mornings. Let them taste how logistics can be beautiful, how a ladle can be a form of leadership, how a sesame ring can stand in for hope. And if you want more journeys like this, through markets, palaces, back rooms, and the human math that keeps it all working, tap subscribe and turn on notifications so the next adventure finds you fresh and hungry. I'll leave you with the leitmotif we kept touching all night: hot bread in a warm hand. That's not just food, it's a philosophy. Make what you can, share what you have, season with mercy, and serve on time. The city will repay you in mornings that arrive intact. Until we meet again at a good counter, follow steam, trust the line, pay fair, say thanks, and don't forget a heel for the walk home.